Hello, friends. Thank you for joining me out here. If you ask me, there's nothing better to do on a chilly late summer night than sit around the fire and tell scary stories. And it just so happens that I have a good one for you tonight. One that I have personal experience with. So grab a hot chocolate, or something a little stronger if you prefer. Get cozy, and let me tell you about one of my favorite local legends, Sweet Hollow Road. If you've grown up on Long Island, New York, odds are you've heard of Sweet Hollow Road. For those of you that haven't, it's a long, windy stretch of narrow road, abutted by densely packed tall trees. It's not entirely desolate, though, as there are several beautiful houses and even a horse stable along the road. On one end, you have West Hills Day Camp, and on the other, you have the underpass for the Northern State Parkway and a cemetery, but we'll get to that later. Driving down this road during the day is actually quite nice, picturesque even, but at night, it's a very different story. There are many legends associated with the area around Sweet Hollow Road and Mount Misery, some dating back to before the Revolutionary War, others far more recent. They include everything from satanic cults to hellhounds to ghosts, all of which are very interesting, but for the purposes of our story tonight, I'm going to focus on the ones that I grew up hearing about in high school, and that I have personal experience with. The Ghost Cop. So, while I've never seen the Ghost Cop, this particular legend is pretty well known where I grew up, and I've heard it retold countless times. There are a few different variations, but this is one that I'm most familiar with. Supposedly back in the 1970s or 80s, a police officer was on patrol around the area of Sweet Hollow Road. Speeding vehicle swerved in front of him, practically running him off the road. The officer switched on his lights and siren and began to give chase. As they barreled down the narrow road, barely missing rocks and trees, the driver of the speeding car suddenly pulled over and came to a stop. The officer, apparently thinking the driver was probably just a dumb teenager on a joyride, got out of his patrol car and began walking towards the vehicle, notebook and flashlight in hand. When he was nearly at the driver's side door of the vehicle, the driver violently kicked it open, produced a handgun, and fired, hitting the officer square in the forehead, killing him instantly. The legend says that the murder was never solved, and the killer was never apprehended. So, the ghost of the officer is doomed to patrol the dark and windy road for all eternity. Since the murder, countless people have reported being pulled over on Sweet Hollow Road, late at night, by a strange-looking police car that looks like it should have been retired 40 years ago. When the officer gets out of his car, they notice his uniform seems to be decades out of date as well. Some people get the sense that something is off about the whole situation and drive away as quickly as they can. Others, the ones that stay put and wait, report that the officer slowly walks up to the vehicle, and as he bends down to look in the window, you can clearly see a bullet hole directly in the center of his forehead, and a big chunk of the back of his skull missing. The Hellhound. I'll be honest, I haven't heard all that much about this one, but since I'm a sucker for a good cryptid story, I figured I would share. As with any really good haunted location, Sweet Hollow Road has its fair share of alleged cult activity. People say that if you venture into the woods around the area, it won't take you long before you come across ritual sites or pentagrams or things of that nature. Supposedly, one of these particularly powerful rituals summoned some sort of hell beast that now roams the area at night. People report seeing glowing red eyes peering at them from beyond the tree line. Some say the eyes even follow you as you try to drive away. And if you're brave, or foolish enough to explore the area on foot at night, well, let's just say I don't think you can outrun the hellbeast. Mary, the ghostly lady in white. Now there are many variations on this particular legend. Depending on who you ask, Mary is either the ghost of a woman that burned to death in a tragic mental asylum fire in the 1700s, or the ghost of a young woman that was hit and killed by a car in the 1970s. Seeing as I'm convinced that I've seen the latter, we will focus on her tonight. The story goes that Mary had gotten into a fight with her boyfriend late one night, and he kicked her out of his car on the side of Sweet Hollow Road, leaving her to walk home. Keep in mind this was the 1970s, so she didn't have a cell phone to call for help or use as a flashlight. So she had to walk. Alone. In the pitch black with nothing to illuminate her path. After supposedly walking a significant way along the narrow winding road, she came to a blind curve. Suddenly and without warning, a car barreled around the tight corner. Mary froze as the driver slammed on the brakes and swerved to avoid the young woman, but it was no use. The car struck Mary, killing her instantly, and then proceeded to plow into the trees on the side of the road, killing the driver as well. Since that tragic night, generations of drivers have reported seeing the apparition of a young woman darting out in front of their car, causing them to slam on the brakes or swerve. Many nighttime car wrecks on Sweet Hollow Road have been attributed to Mary, with the drivers, the ones that survived anyways, swearing they narrowly avoided hitting a woman that jumped out of the trees and ran in the road. As I said earlier, I had what I believed to be an encounter with this particular apparition. Thankfully, I wasn't hurt, and my car was still intact, but the experience has stuck with me all these years later. A little over 10 years ago, the girl I was seeing at the time and I were driving around late at night looking for something to do. Since we both lived at home, we really couldn't get away with hanging out at each other's houses very much. So we frequently drove around into the wee hours of the morning looking for some sort of adventure. That particular night was pretty chilly, being mid-fall if I remember correctly, so many of the less traveled roads had thick clouds of mist lingering over them. Me, being on a bit of a Ghost Adventures kick at the time, thought it would be a great idea to venture up the Sweet Hollow Road. It was nearly Halloween, and the mist made everything extra spooky. She wholeheartedly agreed with me, so we made our way to the southern end of Sweet Hollow Road. As we turned onto the road, the mist really began to thicken up, turning into a dense soup, making it difficult to see much of anything. We passed by the familiar sights of the Melville Cemetery and the supposedly super-haunted Northern State Parkway underpass. At this point, the road begins to narrow, and the mist became more of a dense fog. While this made things suitably creepy, it also made navigating the winding roads somewhat tricky. Up until this point, we were having fun, laughing and joking about getting lost or attacked by cultists, or seeing one of the legendary paranormal apparitions, but as we drove further, our laughter subsided as concern and anxiety began to set in. The fog was so thick, we could barely see anything in front of us, which made navigating the road kinda dangerous. On several occasions, I didn't realize that we had come up to a corner and had to swerve at the last second to avoid hitting trees on the side of the road. Minutes began to feel like hours as we trudged our way through the soupy fog until we came to a particularly tight left turn. As the front of my car rounded the bend, both of us were startled by a bright flash off to our right. When we turned to see what it was, both of us nearly jumped out of our skin. The bright flash was emanating from a cloud-like silhouette of a person, darting toward us at incredible speed. I slammed on the brakes and swerved in an attempt to avoid colliding with the thing, whatever it was. Thankfully, I was driving very slow, and we came to a relatively short stop, just in time to see the mist pass in front of the car and disappear. We both turned to each other and gave a mutual, "Did you just effing see that?" look. Needless to say, we quickly, but cautiously, made our way to the end of the road and got the hell out of there. I have been back there many times, but had never had something like that happen to me again. I guess I should count myself fortunate. Anyways, thank you very much for joining me tonight. We may have to revisit this topic at some point though, because there are so many things about Sweet Hollow Road and Mount Misery we haven't discussed. But until then, get home safe, and if the road is foggy, I suggest you take it nice and slow. Hi all, just wanted to say thank you again for listening. Seeing as this is a brand new channel and I'm new to narration in general, I would very much appreciate any tips or constructive criticisms and would be very thankful if you could like, subscribe, and comment. I certainly plan on making more of these types of videos in the future, so if you have any leads on spooky urban legends, definitely let me know in the comments.